Hi, I'm Jack Draper. Shout out to QualityShot Tennis.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's another preview and prediction video for the Miami Open. It's quarterfinal time, and it's Carlos Alcaraz versus Taylor Fritz, who have never played against each other as well. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup to discuss. And of course, as always, I'll preview it, break it down. I can't talk about previous matches with each player, but I can talk about their current form. I can talk about what we can expect to see from both players. And on top of that, of course, I can talk about ultimately giving my prediction on who I think is going to win and why as well. So let's get into it, because I think there's a lot to discuss. So before we do, actually, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and also do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. And more importantly, if you're listening on YouTube, over 80% of you are still not subscribed to the channel who are viewing these videos and are checking out the channel. So please do subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, and it really does help us out, and I really do appreciate your support. And also shout out to our members, of course, because you guys are complete legends for getting involved as always. Okay, let's break this down then. So we've got a few things to discuss, and I think obviously current form is the biggest thing, really. The biggest thing for me is that Carlos Alcaraz has been in fantastic form, of course, no doubt, and has just won Indian Wells. He's looking to win the Sunshine Double. He's already won the Sunshine Double in his career, as he won Miami last year. He's a defending champion here, and he just won Indian Wells. So he's in great form after not playing any tennis or any hardcourt tennis anyway until Indian Wells last week. He suddenly found some fantastic form, and of course that would have been helped as well by the absence of Nadal and Djokovic. So two players that he would have probably been fearing the most going into or on his return anyway. So what we're going to do first is talk about their form and how they've looked so far. Have a quick peek into their matches so far. Then I'll talk about, tactically where the match might be won or lost, and what tactics might be employed, and what tactics, if I was, say, Taylor Fritz or Carlos Alcaraz, I would use against the opponent as well, and what I think would be useful for each player to utilize, and then ultimately give you guys my prediction. So let's look at Carlos Alcaraz. So you can see here, Tommy Paul, that was a really good matchup. And, I think Tommy Paul is the type of player who's quite versatile and dynamic, that he does tend to cause Alcaraz some issues. He has beaten him in the past, but in terms of at the moment and how Alcaraz has progressed, it's just not a very good matchup for anyone right now, in honesty. So Tommy Paul falling by the wayside, 2 tight sets, but 6-4, 6-4. He dispatched Dusan Lajovic in straight sets, a bagel as well in the first set. Bagnis, again, another bagel dealt out. I mean, it's almost like he's been visiting Iga's bakery and getting tips there. And then, of course, you can see Indian Wells final, beat Medvedev. I mean, it was a comprehensive beatdown, really, of the Russians, 6-3, 6-2. And he's been, up until the Indian Wells final, Medvedev was the informed player after winning 3 titles in a row, looking to make it 4. I mean, Alcaraz just said no. And then obviously a very impressive win over Jannik Sinner, who seems to be one of the players who can cause Alcaraz problems, dispatched him in straight sets as well. For Taylor Fritz, he has had some good wins as well. Holger Rune, they'd never played before as well, but he beat him. So, he'll take some confidence from that, because yes, Holger Rune hasn't won a Grand Slam, but he's won the Paris Masters last year. He beat Novak Djokovic as well in that final. So Holger Rune is a very accomplished player, and he is one of the exciting young talents looking to kick on. I think he said the other day, Holger Rune, that he thinks himself Alcaraz and Sinner could be the new big 3. I mean, maybe worth doing a video on that in the future, but do keep an eye out actually as well, and do check out our video on the next gen, taking over from the now big 2, but big 3 in tennis. I did do a video on that and also gave my opinion on it as a member request. Fritz also beat Shapovalov in straight sets. Doesn't seem to be a great matchup for the Canadian. Same with Navas or the wild card, and then lost to Sinner in 3 very tight sets in Indian Wells. So he's been in some good form and was the Indian Wells champion going into that tournament last week as well. In terms of head-to-head, you can see here they've never played. Official rankings, we know that. Number 1 for Alcaraz, 10 for Fritz. Live rankings, I mean, doesn't really mean much. And if you want a little bit of profile into each player, there's a little bit here as well. But what we really want to talk about is tactically how this match is going to play out. TNNS says 74% as a wow, as a win probability for Alcaraz, which is big. And interestingly, you can see on this picture, right, Alcaraz looking very bulky almost, especially bicep bulging, tricep bulging. I said this the other day, and I do stand by it. I think since coming back this year, I think Alcaraz has slimmed down a little bit. He definitely bulked up, and probably rightly so, because he was very skinny when he first came onto the tour and needed to strengthen up. But I think what's happened is he's bulked up, and then he's just leaned down a little bit and kept that lean mass or lean muscle and athletic, fast twitch muscles that are needed to compete at an elite level in tennis, but just dropped a little bit of weight to be a bit more flexible as well. So I think he's almost got the best of both worlds, looking almost like a hybrid between a Nadal and a Djokovic, which I know a lot of people say that Alcaraz is a hybrid of all three of the big three in a way. And you can see similarities with his game with those three, but that's not to say he's going to achieve the same things that those guys did. So let's break down then exactly how I think this match is going to go and what to look out for. So if we want to talk about skill set, for those who are not super familiar with these players, Carlos Alcaraz is a all-round player. He can play on all surfaces by the looks of it, and he has an all-round game. And what does that mean? It means that he doesn't have any massive glaring weaknesses. I think in the past, his serve was something that a lot of people are looking into. It's not, the biggest weapon on tour, and it's definitely not a top 10 serve. It might be top 20 maybe now, you'd say. But it's in the past, it was more of a rallying tool, which is in line with what Djokovic and Nadal had early in their careers as well. But for Alcaraz, the big difference is that he's able to serve big, as in almost touch or go beyond 140 miles per hour when he's really ramping it up, that is. On average, he can hit 130 plus miles per hour, that is. So he had the ability and has the ability to be explosive on serve. But the big issue was his spot serving. He wasn't really hitting his spots on serve. He wasn't being consistent with the first serve, and he didn't really have enough maybe variation as well. Wasn't utilizing it effectively enough. Also, his second serve wasn't the best as well. He's improved that aspect of his game pretty fundamentally in the sense that I think at the US Open, his serve where he won, his serve was very good. Now, I don't think at the moment it's at the level of a Djokovic or a Federer. We're talking about Djokovic now and Federer obviously throughout his career. I think it's getting to that. It will get to that point at some point, but it's still a work in progress. But it's now got to a point where I don't think it's necessarily a weakness. And that's a positive for Alcaraz, because I think in the past, returners wouldn't be fearful at all of the Alcaraz. So I think nowadays they are. And he does a couple of things with his serve, which we can discuss in a second as well, which make him a little bit more unique to some of the players on tour, especially on hard courts, because I think he employs some similar tactics on clay onto the hard courts, which you probably wouldn't expect. So serve-wise then, we talk about serve. Can hit the flat serve, obviously, in his spots. Hits a good kick serve as well, and the slice serve he utilizes. He likes to come into the net when he can and serve volley, which is another aspect to his game, which is why we say he's a pretty all-round player. But one thing that he utilizes that not a lot of players do on hard courts is he will deliberately adjust his serve position and go way towards the tram lines as much as possible and on the ad side and make it very obvious he's going to hit a kick serve, but he doesn't care, and he'll just hit a big kick serve for a first serve even, and then he'll try and come in behind it, or he'll try and then obviously utilize the open court and drag them out. Very interesting tactic. He doesn't utilize it all the time, but it's something that he uses as a change up, and I think it's, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of it, I have to be honest with you, but it seems to work effectively for him. So who am I to say that it's not a useful tactic to employ, even on a hard court? In terms of the serve return dynamic, because obviously we need to talk about it in the sense of Alcaraz versus Fritz, I don't think Fritz's returning is elite by any stretch. But Fritz's returning has improved, I think. If we kind of look back to Fritz versus Nadal at Wimbledon, in the quarterfinals when Nadal's serve was pretty much gone, in the sense that he was serving just above or below 100 miles per hour because his abdominal muscles had tweaked. He was struggling to return really effectively against that and actually get on the front foot. I think he's improved since then. He clearly loves playing in the US as well, and that gives him a little bit of an extra confidence boost. He's going to have to be really good on the Alcaraz serve, because we know that Alcaraz return-wise is going to be very switched on, and he's been rolling through people. But for Fritz, I think there's some positive signs, because he's equally good returning on the backhand or forehand wing. In fact, in the past, his backhand was probably more solid than his forehand. What he's done really well, Fritz, is be more aggressive on the forehand side, not necessarily hitting it harder, but going for the line, going a bit close to the lines more than he would maybe, and being more, taking more risks, more calculated risks on the forehand as well. And I think that's been good to see, and it's definitely paid dividends playing a slightly more attacking brand of tennis, where I feel like in the past he's maybe a bit more cautious. He's also it does mean, I think, that the kick serve into his backhand won't be as effective against Fritz, because I think Fritz's backhand, as I said, is probably a top 10 two-hander on tour, potentially top 5. I think, you have to talk about Sinner, Zverev, Djokovic. In my eyes, they're the 3 best. Fritz is not too far behind. Rune as well, probably the 5, to be honest with you, if I'm thinking about it now. Alcaraz will then, so he'll be looking to hold easily, but Fritz needs to also be ready to have Alcaraz attack the net, and that means trying to be intelligent with his returning. He can't just go deep down the middle, because for the most part that probably won't be effective. If he goes deep down the middle consistently, Alcaraz will then sneak in behind his serve and he'll get an easy volley, because he's that athletic and he transitions that well that he'll be able to serve and volley at will if Fritz does that, especially out wide. He'll hit the slice serve out wide on the juice side, he'll hit the kick serve on the juice side, on the ad side even, drag him out on both sides and do that. And then occasionally he'll go down a tee as a change-up, as a variation, and he'll probably hit a few aces, because Fritz will then gamble out wide to try and make sure he gets that return in with a lot of intent, a lot of depth on that ball as well. So that'll be interesting to watch how that unfolds. Of course, we haven't seen it before, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's more me hypothesizing how I think it might go. I think Alcaraz, given how aggressive he is with the 1+ shots, unless Fritz is going to be really proactive on the returns and go deep at the feet of Alcaraz, or is able to hit aggressive returns, which I'm not sure he'll be able to do consistently, Alcaraz is going to unleash on the 1+ shot. And that's going to be an issue for Fritz, because majority of the time that's a forehand by Alcaraz, and normally it's massive. And he tries to shorten the points on his serve, as you should. If you're someone who's got a good enough serve and a monster forehand, then of course you're wanting to get through those quickly and then put pressure on your opponent straight away, because they have a quick turnaround, of course, in their serve. So that's a serve return dynamic for Alcaraz. For Fritz, his serve is monster. It is. He serves massive. He really does. It's a very simple technique, but he hits his spots beautifully at times. And I think that's something he's really improved, because he's always served above 140 mile per hour and was able to serve big, but maybe wasn't hitting his spots as well. I think his consistency has definitely come into it in the last year or so, I would say, which is really great to see. So we'll see how he gets on. But I think if we're looking at first serve percentages, so Alcaraz was at 61% first serves against Tommy Paul, 79% win percentage behind the first serve, 79% behind the second serve, which is, incredible. Fritz about the same, 63% first serve, but this is the difference: 56% win percentage behind the first serve, 62% behind the second serve. So he's not backing up his serve as well as you might think. Now, Rune is a very good returner, by the way, very good returner. You might say arguably better than Alcaraz, to be honest with you, in terms of returning. Alcaraz's stats is interesting to see, because Tennis Insights, who are a great page on Instagram, who they give a value, an arbitrary value to serving, returning, forehand, backhand out of 10, right? And Alcaraz is never at the top of the serve or return stats, but he's always towards the top end of the backhand and forehand stats, which is interesting. So his ground strokes are really, really high quality, but his returning's not always. And he is a good returner. I think he's a natural returner. He just, at times, maybe tries to go for too much, or is actually a little bit passive. And I feel like he struggles to find an in-between a little bit on the return even, or something that really suits him. And it's something that he's worked on in his ground stroke game in the rallying exchanges. In the past, he would be he'd be trying crazy things in crazy moments, and there are moments where it will come off. But you also need to learn how to play the percentages and be a bit more patient, and that's something that he's definitely done. I know Gil Gross is in Miami, and he asked him the question, and Alcaraz said, "Look, when I can be aggressive, I'll be aggressive. But if I have to, be a bit more cautious or a bit more patient in the exchanges, then I will be, and then I'll wait for the right opportunity." And that's exactly how you should be, because you're aggressive until it's harmful to yourself, right? And I think that's exactly what Alcaraz does really well and finds a great balance on when it comes to ground stroke and baseline exchanges. That's for sure. And also knowing when to come into the net, etc., and transition. But the serve return, especially the return, I think he hasn't quite figured it out yet, but he's obviously dangerous. So I think that's a really, really big part of this matchup that Fritz needs to take advantage of. He needs to serve well. I think he has to hit his spots. I don't think he hit his spots as well as he would have liked against Holger Rune. He needs to do so against Alcaraz, and if he does, he will gain some success from it for sure. Because Alcaraz, like Fritz, not huge weakness on the backhand side as well on the backhand return, but the one thing that he does maybe not do as well as he will miss some returns. He will give you a couple of short returns, especially if you're serving that quickly into corners. So I think Fritz needs to be clever with it. Hit the slice serve at times as well, drag Alcaraz out, make him think, vary his serve, and don't let Alcaraz get settled. I think with Alcaraz, a big thing with all these players who hit so big from the back of the court, if you let them get settled, if you let them get into a rhythm, it is so tough then to take away that rhythm from them. And that's why people talk about the slice and trying to vary up your pace, your spins. And I think if Fritz does that on his serve, he'll definitely have success. From the back of the court, it's a really interesting one because Fritz doesn't like coming to the net at all. He's trying to add it to his game. You can see in the last few weeks, he's tried to tweak with it a little bit. There were massive, I think, not criticisms, but maybe constructive feedback given to him by a lot of pros saying, look, you're starting to hit the ball really big from the back of the court, but you're so tentative to come forward. Like he would come forward to a half court ball, he'd kind of hit a shot into the corner, and then he'd go back onto the baseline, and he would never actually approach the net, which is just bizarre to even think about, right? When you're that good. So from the back of the court, that is. For Alcaraz, of course, he doesn't have that problem, and that's why we talk about how he's such a varied player. He's able to stick with you from the back of the court and grind out if needed. We saw against Medvedev at Indian Wells in the final. The longer rallies he was winning, which is crazy to think about against someone like Medvedev, who's a backboard. But then he can also come forward and be aggressive and short to the point and volley. And he has these different layers which make it really, really hard to play against. And I think it was actually Bagnis who came out after the first round of Miami and said, look, he's so tough to play against because every ball that you get, every shot you get from Alcaraz, the next shot is never the same. So you might get a forehand that's really flat and powerful into the corner, and then he might give you a really heavy topspin ball, topspin forehand next. And then it might be a backhand slice. And he has that variation, and he was saying he utilizes it so well. And that's a really interesting point. So that's what Alcaraz does to try and make sure that his opponent isn't in rhythm. And then it means that he's able to get onto the front foot as well. So interesting to see how Fritz handles that. Is he going to be able to handle it well and also stick to his consistency from the back of the court? But he needs to make it difficult for Alcaraz. Now, his backhand is, as I said, very good. So I think the backhand to backhand, he'll have some success. He will. He needs to be proactive in that exchange, though. He needs to go line first. He needs to try and put Alcaraz on the back foot. The only issue for him will be that Alcaraz's defense on the forehand side is pretty phenomenal. And we've already seen this week players trying to approach the forehand after dragging him out onto the backhand side, and Alcaraz on the run hitting ridiculous running forehand passes. And that's going to be a risk, I think, that Fritz might have to take at times. The one thing that I will say that I've seen some players do, and I think they need to utilize it more, is trying to go in behind Alcaraz. Now, I think for a serve 1+ player, that's actually a really good shout. You have to be clever, though, because if you go too early with your 1+ shot behind Alcaraz, then normally he can read it. I feel like he reads body shape really well, and he'll anticipate it. You almost need to delay kind of really, really, what's the word? Be exaggerated in your shape on your forehand or backhand into the open court, and then kind of last minute just turn almost like a fake, almost like a fake shot almost, and then going behind. And if you get him in behind, then he's going to be on the back foot because he's going to be on a stretch like that onto the forehand. He can't hurt you like that because he's at that age and he has this athletic ability, which means that if you go into the open court, you better make sure that he is not able to hit a clean strike, because if he does, you're in trouble. You're in real trouble. So Fritz does have power from the back of the court, so I think that's something that he could employ as well, and it might mean he has some success with it. He's not going to come in and volley for the most part, you would imagine, and probably not a great option against Alcaraz, given how good he is at passing people at the net, and Fritz isn't the best volleyer currently. So some things to think about. Fritz will have to utilize the lob because Alcaraz will come forward. He needs to be pinpoint on his passes as well. Forehand to forehand is, I don't think would, I just don't think it's a good matchup. I think Alcaraz just will outclass him in that department, I think. And that's one spot which I just don't think Fritz is going to have much success in, honesty, because Alcaraz is just so good, and as I said, has so many different looks on the forehand, which just makes him so unique and is backed up by what people have been saying about him. So let's see how, again, I think obviously conditions-wise, if it's hot, if it's humid, Alcaraz athletically is, a level above Fritz, I would say. Fritz, though, has worked really hard on his stamina, on his endurance, so he will fight, and that's the biggest thing about Fritz for me, is he will fight for every point. He'll fight hard, he'll make it, he'll dig deep if needed, and if Alcaraz's level drops at all, Fritz will pounce. So I do think it's going to be Alcaraz in straight sets. I think it's going to be really tough for Fritz, but what I will say is, if Alcaraz doesn't play the level we've seen in the last week, Fritz is no mug. Like, he will make him pay. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be 2 easy sets. I think it's, we're looking at, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a tie break, because both, like, Fritz serves so well at times, and then maybe, second set maybe falls away if Alcaraz wins that tiebreaker. But it could be 3, but I just think Alcaraz at the moment in the form he's in, it's very tough to pick against him. And it's hard to see anyone beat him if he's playing that type of tennis. So it'll be interesting to see what Fritz brings to the table and whether what I've said actually does come to fruition, because we've never seen this matchup before. So I'm really intrigued for it. Let me know your thoughts as well in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to win and why? And also, do you agree with what I've said or not? If not, let me know. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.